Tonight on Jim's Talk Africa, my guest is Steve Wimble, the senior pastor of Cityhill Church, one of the leading churches in Durban, South Africa. Steve shares with me about his experience of walking through a valley of a shadow of death and the lessons he learned from it about suffering in leadership. Tonight on Jim's Talk Africa. But before we do that, please like this video and leave a comment below. Let's know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell button and share this video with somebody else.
From Cape Town to Cairo and from Mogadishu to Dakar, this is Jim's Talk Africa. Here's your host, Chim Onyibilanma.
Hi there, I'm Chim Onyibilama, your host. Thanks for joining me today for your weekly show. I'm looking forward to sharing my interview today with my friend Steve Wimble, a pastor in Durban. But before we do that, I want to share a burden with you. The island nation of the Maldives is one of the most unevangelized country in our world today, right up there with North Korea. Some of you may know that it as one of the preferred tourist destination on earth. It's like paradise. Look at the pictures on your screen. But Joshua Project, the acknowledged global missions research platform, estimates that 100%, that is the entire population of the indigenes in this country, are unreached. That is heartbreaking for me. I was in that country a few years ago in an attempt to find some open doors for the gospel there. And I was told by one or two indigenous, told there were one or two indigenous followers of Christ only. And these are undercover former Muslims because of the severe persecution there in this Indian Ocean Asian country. You know, think about it, there are just about 10 people or so out of a population of 500,000 who are following Christ. And I've been praying, the Maldives must be saved. I feel led by God to do a 6-month prayer focus for the Maldives to pull down the barriers to evangelizing this beautiful island nation and to see churches planted there. I'm looking for 200 people like you who will join me to pray every week starting in November 2020. I will send you one email each month with prayer points and you will use it to pray on your own for this country. And I believe that God will use our prayers to open the floodgates of salvation on the precious souls on the island of the Maldives. If you'd like to join me in praying for the Maldives, please send your email address to the contact on your screen and let us know you want to join this focused prayer for the Maldives. Also, if you feel called to go and preach the gospel as a missionary there, let us know because we will need a lot of laborers for what God is putting in our heart to do. Thank you for listening to me. Now let's go to my interview with Steve Wimble. You're going to be edified as Steve shares about his journey through pain and the lessons he learned about the sovereignty of God. Please don't go away. Hi there, welcome to this segment of your show. Like I said in the intro, my guest today is Steve Wimble, who is the lead elder or lead pastor, like some would say, of the Cityhill Church in the Hillcrest in Durban, South Africa. Steve, you're welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Chim. Great to be with you this morning.
Thank you so much. Steve, first of all, you know, every time we talk, I always start with this. I know you as a friend, and many times you see people who lead big churches. There's always an air around them. How come there's no air around you? Like the big shot, you're the bishop.
Chim, I appreciate you saying that. Certainly when I look at the life of Jesus, to my mind, he didn't elevate himself above anybody else. In fact, when Judas arrived in the Garden of Gethsemane with the detachment of Roman soldiers, they had to ask, who is he? They told Judas, point him out to us. He didn't have a fancy robe or anything that distinguished him from the rest of his disciples. Exactly. So to my mind, we get the privilege of shepherding God's people, but that doesn't put us above anybody. It might put us in the front to lead, but there's level ground at the foot of the cross. So I don't think any of us ought to have any airs and graces. We all are saved by grace, and without God's grace, we're nobody, we're nothing.
Wow.
So that really influences my thinking, I guess.
I think it's a message we all need to keep coming back to as leaders, because with power comes the temptation to forget that you're just another brother among the brothers.
Absolutely.
So Steve, you 23 years of ministry. If you were to go back, and I know your story, that's why I'm bringing this up. There was a time when you went through what we would call the shadow of the valley of death. Tell us a bit about this.
Yeah, Chim, it certainly hasn't all been plain sailing, that's for sure. We've got 2 sons, and when our second son was born, that was about 13 years ago. Soon after his birth, although I don't think linked to it, but soon after his birth, I started to get very strange symptoms of pain in my joints. And for a few weeks, it was my legs and feet were sore at night, and then it was my arms and my wrists. And it got to a point where one night, in the middle of the night, I got up to go to the loo, and there was such tremendous pain from just walking on the ground. I got back into bed and had tears in my eyes from the physical pain. I'd been to a GP who hadn't given me a diagnosis, but that night I thought, whatever I do, I've got to find out what's wrong with me. The following week, I visited a specialist down in Durban, and as I walked through the door of her consulting rooms, she said, I think you've got, and she named a name that I didn't recognize. She said, but I'd like to check you out. And for 45 minutes, she made me do various things. And at the end, she said, I think you've got an autoimmune disease. And she gave this long name. I didn't really know what it was, but I was so grateful that it had a name. So I asked a little bit about it, and she said, the best explanation I can give is that your immune system, which is meant to defend your body against harmful things, starts attacking your body and attacks healthy cells. And it started attacking my joints. I had a skin condition as well, and chronic fatigue. So I said to her, so what medicine do I take? How can I be cured? And she said to me, what the condition you've got is incurable, but the meds we've got will help you manage it. And it was such a mixed emotion. I was so grateful that it had a name, but I was devastated that it was now an untreatable. Well, they could treat the symptoms, but not the condition. It was incurable. It led me into a very dark valley. I thought that from that time, the meds that I got would just help my energy grow and increase. But actually what happened is that from that time, I got worse and worse and worse for about 3 months until the meds started helping and I got better, but I wasn't back to 100% of my previous health.
Not yourself again?
No, for about 6 or 7 years, at my very best, I was at about 60% energy of what I'd had before. So I went from being, I'm quite a front-footed, organized, driven person at my worst, and from being very busy to being, for those 3 months, completely bedridden.
Not having enough energy.
Not having enough energy to get up and do anything. As I started to get better, I could get up for 1 hour a day and do active work. Then I'd be in bed again for 23. And it was one of the most discouraging feelings that you could imagine. It was like living in this dark tunnel. I had these 2 beautiful young children and I couldn't be around them.
Boys for that matter.
2 boys, very active, amazing kids. And I had, one of my symptoms was that my body ran a low-grade fever the whole time. So as soon as I stood up, I would have this fever hit me. And when you have a flu, you want to get back into bed for 2 or 3 days and just lie down till it passes. It was exactly that feeling, but day after day, week after week.
Were you still preaching at this time?
For 2 months, I was booked off completely. And then I was on a team, and the leader of that team, the lead pastor, said to me he felt God had given him just one word. He said, whatever time I needed to take off during the week, that was fine. But he wanted me to keep preaching at least once on a Sunday. I was part of a multi-site church, so there were multiple preaching opportunities for a lot of the team every week. And so I'd prepare this message, craft it in tears and sweat just from the fever, drive to church with this pulsating fever, deliver the message, and before the service had finished, walk off the stage, climb back in my car, and race home to climb back into bed. So I was still preaching, but I felt awful doing it. It was terrible.
How did you feel about God at this time? I know you later talked about a picture of Joseph that God gave you, but how did you feel? Here you are ministering to others,
Yeah.
and I'm sure praying for others at this time.
Yeah.
And some people even come in and saying we get some relief.
Yeah.
And here you were going through this dark tunnel.
Absolutely. I think my faith had on different days was at different points. There were a number of days where I was trusting God flat out for my healing, saying, God, please, you're the God who heals. And then you just know that he hasn't healed you because the next day you wake up sick, and the next day you're sick, and the next day you're sick. And I was preaching on a Sunday, getting feedback from people that the message had had tremendous impact on their lives, going back, climbing into my sick bed. And over time, my faith for healing started to dwindle a whole lot. I guess my idea of the sovereignty of God continued to grow because I thought there's nothing I can do. I have no control over this illness. I can't flick a switch. I'm stuck. And it's in the valleys that some fruit grows that can never grow on the mountaintops.
Good word.
I don't know why God takes us into those valleys or allows these valleys to happen. I don't know why I got that disease at that time. And all I could do was cry out to God, knowing in my heart that he's good, but feeling in my body that I feel bad. And just desperately clinging on and saying, God, whether you heal me or not, I'm still serving you, I'm still following you, but I'm feeling very, very, very discouraged. There's a certain part of our wiring that needs purpose to be outworked in order to feel fulfilled. And just lying in my bed at home day after day, unable to feel like I was productive, led me to feeling quite unfulfilled, very, 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 very low. And questioning whether I was in the right vocation. Over and over, I wondered to myself, I wonder if it's my job that's
causing me this problem.
Exactly. Because when I met the specialist up front, she asked me all about what I did. And actually, in my work at the church, I'd had a major job description change. And in this change, I'd become sick. And I think what had happened is, in that change of the work that I was doing, I started running in a lane that wasn't in my main strengths. And I was doing my best, and hopefully the work was going well, but my body was under major stress. So I was working full-time at a church, and the stress of that job
was affecting your health.
Exactly. And so I questioned over and over, am I in the right vocation?
Why do you think God allows us to go through pain, Steve?
Chima, I've had so many people, Christians and non-Christians, who've engaged with the discussion with me, asking what I think is the most difficult theological question. Why does God allow pain? And for me, the interesting thing about the Bible is how much pain there is in the Bible. There's a lot of loss. There's a lot of suffering. You look at the book of Job and many other books, and the one question God never answers is why? Why did he allow it? He doesn't answer. But the whole book is designed to help us figure how we are to respond to the pain and who we are to look to. So we don't get the answer to the why, but we do get the how and we do get the who.
So we ask the wrong question when we say the why.
Absolutely.
Rather, we should be sticking to, how do you want me to live?
Yeah.
What are you saying to me? You know what we're going to do, Steve? We're going to go for a short break. When we come back, God healed you finally. And we want to talk about that and just try to understand this journey that God took you through. We're talking to Steve Wimble. He's the lead pastor of Cityhill Church in Durban. And we're sharing about the journey he went through to where he is today. Please don't go away. We'll be right back.
God used the stumbling blocks that you think are stumbling block as stepping stone to greatness for you.
Where is your faith? Where is your faith?
The way the church in Africa is now, what we need is revival.
We cannot correct a wrong with another wrong. We cannot correct the injustices of the past by perpetuating.
You have what it takes to make a difference. So don't give up on yourself, because God has certainly not given up on you.
Hi there, welcome back to the second part of my interview with Steve Wimble. He's the lead pastor of Cityhill Church in Durban. And we've been talking about the journey he went through with God, a moment in his life that you call the shadow of a valley of death. Steve We ended by saying we ask the wrong questions when we say why. We rather should be saying, how do you want me to live? And eventually you came to a place where you were saying to God, what do you want me to do now? Yeah. How do you want me to live? What did you hear God say to you at that point?
A whole lot of different things. But one of the stories in the Bible that stood out to me, it was my life raft story, was the story of Joseph. Joseph had a start of faith and favor. And he had had a journey together with his dad and with his family. Then, due to circumstances outside of his control, he ends up as a slave and in a jail cell. And although I wasn't a physical slave, I felt that in my health,
you were in prison.
I was in a jail cell. I could do nothing to change my conditions there. And through that story, I think I saw that Joseph's response was to continue to trust in God, even though he did not see the outcome.
Wow.
We read the story, we look back, we say, oh, he became prime minister.
We would never have told.
But when he was in the jail cell, he didn't know that. He couldn't see that part of his future.
It doesn't even add up there, it would end up there.
Absolutely. And so in my story, before I got sick, I felt I had a God-given dream to pastor a local church. It was something that I was working towards, and it pulsated inside of me, similar to Joseph's dream that he had had. In the sickness, I did not have the energy to even do the work that I needed to do, or father my children the way I was meant to. And that dream completely evaporated. It was 6 or 7 years of this terrible health. And then one day, while I was still sick, I felt God speak to me and say to me, I'm opening a door for you to move from your current church. I'm going to open a door of church leadership in a new place. And the old Steve would have jumped around, got excited, started making some phone calls. The beaten up Steve said, God, that's not possible. I don't have the energy to do that. If you heal me, then I'll know you're calling me to take the next step.
What did God say to that bad name with you?
Just like that, in my heart, I felt the Holy Spirit say to me, that's not faith. Faith is you saying, yes, Lord, and then I felt him say, I'll take care of things after that. I didn't feel he promised me healing. Just you say yes and I'll take care of things.
Wow.
In my heart, I grappled with this yes, because I had been so sick for so many years. And a little bit like Moses, I started thinking of excuses. But in my heart, I said, God, whatever you've got for me, please guide me. Soon after that, an opportunity arose, and it was through conversation with men that I was accountable to. An opportunity arose for me to move to a different church together with my wife and take over the leadership of the church where we are now, Cityhill Church in Hillcrest. And I had so much trepidation in the discussion, but an amazing thing happened. The actual day that our predecessor, Peter, had spoken to me about coming, I had just met with him to get some advice. And I told him my whole story, and he said to me, he said, Steve, 7 years ago, so just before I got sick, he said, I felt God say that you would be moving down to take over the leadership of this church from us. Would you consider it? You could have knocked me over with a feather. I was absolutely stunned. From that appointment, I went to see a lady who had been helping me a little bit with my health. So 1 week before, I'd gone to see her with all the meds that I was taking, all the drugs and my vitamins, etc. And she looked at all of this. She took a pinprick of my blood, looked at it on the screen and said, boy, I can see you've got big health problems. I went to her a week later. So I've just had this invitation to move churches into where we are now. And my next appointment is to have a follow-up consult on this bad blood of mine and my bad health. She takes another pinprick of my blood, puts it up on the screen, and then she says to me, what's happened? I say, what do you mean? She says, the blood I'm looking at now looks like it's come from a different person. I can't find all the illness that you used to have. And I said, I have no idea. I just did what you told me to in the last week. And it turns out that I had a miraculous healing of all of my symptoms.
Praise God.
So the underlying condition medically is still there. I see a specialist once a year. And he's just said to me, you're in remission. Just come see me again next year.
So at the very time when you were saying yes to this new thing God was bringing, God was also working something that even the medical lady would not be able to explain.
Absolutely.
How is this possible just within the last visit and now that you will be completely free of all the symptoms?
Absolutely.
And it was God again saying to you just obey me, I'll take care of the rest.
Yes.
Even though he didn't promise you, he'll heal you. And I love the part where you said that the new Steve, the old Steve, it seems to be that though we don't have the why of pain, it has a way of bringing us through a time of refining.
Absolutely.
Character, something happens to our character.
Absolutely.
It's as if there's a real authentic faith in God.
Yeah.
A leaning on God, less of a independent, I can do this, but more like, Lord, I need you.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
100%. In 1 Peter chapter 1, he writes about your faith, which is of greater worth than gold. And I think God is so interested in our faith, he'll go to great lengths to form and fashion our faith and refine our character. And so I can't say God caused the sickness. There were some things that I did wrong in retrospect. I mismanaged my time. I mismanaged my energy, my emotions. And so I've been on a journey of discovering who I really am in God and changing my thinking and changing my way of living. But one of the deep works that God has done in my life has been to bring about a different kind of humility. And it's difficult to analyze your own humility because as soon as
I'm humble, guys, I'm humble.
as soon as you say that, you're too proud. But I see that so much of my heart had arrogance right at the bottom part of it. And when for 7 years you've just been laid low and
Brought to the end of yourself.
yeah, I mean, on one occasion we went on holiday and I tried to lift the suitcases out of the car to take inside. I was too weak to lift my own luggage out the
The
car.
man of the house.
I had to go and sit down and say to my wife, I can't do it. I have to climb back into bed. Please, could you bring the luggage in? And that humbles you. And my wife was amazing. Not that she was trying to be take charge of those things.
Yeah.
But over 7 years, I felt like the tenderizing hammer of God landing on my soul day after day after day, reminding me that he's in charge. And I tried to bargain with him. I said, God, if you heal me today, I will do this for you. And I
Go
stayed
to
sick.
Mongolia.
And I'd love to say that I'm now truly humble in every aspect. I'm not. But God has done deep, deep work, I think, in helping me understand how reliant all of us are actually on him. When we forget that, we become arrogant. And when we remember it, it just brings us back into the right place that we're meant to be with him.
And you know, we have a theology about faith that we kind of believe that with enough faith in your heart, you're going to get that healing right away. And yet here you were ministering to people that were coming back with feedbacks of God working, and you were praying, and for 6 years, there was not, I mean, you really didn't see a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And what do you speak to some of the theology we have that I feel is unbalanced about faith?
Yeah, I think the message of faith is so central to the New Testament that it's easy to make too much of it and to make too little of it. And I think when I say we make too much of it, what can end up happening is we start putting faith in faith. So we say, if you have enough faith, or if your faith is of a certain type of quality, then God will do this, this, and this, which to my mind is saying that faith is sovereign
Of itself.
and God is the servant of my faith.
Wherever it takes God, God will go there. And some people preach that.
And my understanding of the Bible, God is sovereign, my faith is in him. And bigger faith equals bigger trust in him, and he is sovereign. I can change some things, there's other things I can't change, but he oversees all of it. So I think it's a movement from having faith in faith to having a deep down faith and trust in God that's not being resigned and saying whatever will be, will be. It's, God, I'm trusting you, but in the end, may your will be done, which is the prayer that Jesus prayed on the night that he was betrayed. May your will be done, not my will.
I love that. It's the refined faith, the way you come to real authentic trust in God. You are not resigned. It's not the wind of anything that comes that is blowing you. But it's this confidence in the revelation of a good God, a God who holds you, that though I walk through the valley of a shadow of death, you are with me.
Absolutely.
And you are going to take care of me. Steve, we're rounding up, and I want you to look into the camera and speak to somebody. It might be a servant of God. It might just be a Christian going through their own valley of the shadow of death. And what would you say to them from what you've gone through?
Yeah.
Your camera is over there.
Yeah. We don't have control over all the things that come at us, but every single one of us has got a control over how we respond to those things. And if you are a person who's got your faith in Christ, we get to look at the God who made the world, and he is our Father. And we don't always understand what comes from his hand. In the moment, it's easy to think, God, why did you allow this to happen to me? If I were the father, I would never have given this to my child. But Isaiah said God's ways are so much higher than ours, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And I truly believe it's only in retrospect, when we get to the end of our life and are with him in glory one day, we'll be able to look back, and all the threads of the different bits of pain and suffering and experience that each one of us have had, the individual threads we didn't understand. But in retrospect, we'll be able to look back and see that the master hand of God was involved in forming a tapestry out of the different threads of our lives. And every little bit of every little bit of thread that we didn't understand and we questioned forms this amazing tapestry that speaks to his glory and his incredible grace. And so if you're asking the question, God, why? Why are you allowing these things? Why are you allowing this pain and suffering in my life? I'd strongly encourage you today to turn your eyes heavenward. Look to the Father. Your prayer could even be this simple: God, I don't understand why, but I do know who. And I'm looking to you. I'm putting my trust in you that you'll keep me going for day after day after day till you bring me to be with you in glory.
Amen. That was really good, Steve. And I just want to say, if you're there listening to us and you're not giving your heart to Christ, you're not a follower of Christ yet. And sometimes you ask, why did God do this, or why did he do that? I want you to know that God loves you. We might not have, like Steve said, the answer to the why, but this is what we know: God loves you. And he loves you so much that he wants you to come into a relationship with him. And I'll come back later and I'll lead you into a time of prayer. And I want you to decide that you would give your heart to Jesus, and you would experience this same God that Steve has talked about, and who is able to walk through with you, whether through the mountains of life or through the valleys, because that's who our God is. Steve, thank you so much for coming on this show. It's been a pleasure sharing your story with everybody.
You're welcome, Chim. Great being here. God bless.
Please like this video and leave a comment below. Let's know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell button and share this video with somebody else.